So time then for the press preview. A first look at what is on the front of Saturday's papers. Tonight, we'll see what's making those headlines with Polly Mackenzie from the think tank Demos and PR consultant Alex Deane. A very good evening to both of you. Chat in a second. First of all, let's take a look at those front pages for you. Why don't we start with the Times, leading on the warning from scientists that there could be a third wave of coronavirus infections as case numbers surge across Europe. Here's your Telegraph. The former head of the vaccine task force has accused some European leaders of being irresponsible after they cast doubt on the efficacy of the Oxford jab. The Star is also critical of Europe's stance, accusing some leaders of vaccine nationalism. The Sun has a picture of the Prime Minister having his jab as the number of doses given in a day hits a new record. The Yorkshire Post reports on the mental health crisis brought about by the pandemic and says younger women are the worst affected. The Mail says there are questions to be answered over some of the costs associated with the refurbishment of Boris Johnson's flat. Onto the FT, the government is said to be drawing up plans to run Liberty Steel with public money while it looks for a buyer. Harry just says sorry to the Queen is the headline in the Express. And the Mirror reports that Brad Pitt's son has testified against his father in his parents' divorce case. And I'm joined by Polly Mackenzie and Alex Deane. Hello to you both. Right, let's start with the front of the Times then. Polly, it's a tale of two stories, really. On the one hand, we've got Boris Johnson, thumbs up. He's had his jab. We've had this record-breaking day, more than 660,000 jabs, first and second doses. But then, if you look at the other side of the coin, alarm over new wave. We've got these rising infections on the continent, which really are a concern, aren't they?
Yeah, we've been doing fantastically on the vaccine rollout. And even though there's been some concerns over a kind of slight slowdown in the supplies we're getting over the coming month, this was a record day. And that is just brilliant to see. But partly because vaccine rollout has been much slower across most of Europe, they are seeing this wave, tens of thousands of cases a day in some countries, because they're not vaccinating their populations quickly enough. And of course, lots of those cases will be among younger people who we hope will not die. But they are still huge numbers of vulnerable older people, including, I confess an interest. My mum, my stepdad, both who live in France, haven't been able to get a vaccination. If they were in the UK, they'd have been vaccinated more than a month ago. They could just walk up to a clinic now and get a vaccination. They're not even allowed into the country. So it's incredibly frustrating. And it reminds us that no country is really free from this virus until we all are. And lots of those cases in continental Europe, well, I mean, it's a small proportion, perhaps 5% are the South African variant, against which the vaccines are the least effective, though they're still quite effective. They're still better than nothing. So there is real cause for concern. We absolutely have to do what we can to encourage, support, whatever it is, these European nations to pick up the pace.
Yeah, I mean, it was the WHO Secretary-General, I think, wasn't it, who said no one is safe until everyone is safe. But, Alex, when you look at this headline, alarm over new wave, we can learn from history here, can't we? Because when there was, a rise in cases in Europe, then eventually there was a rise in cases here. How concerned are you that things could start going the wrong way in Britain, despite the success of the vaccine rollout?
Well, the logic you've given is the logic that our scientists give for being so concerned, that we always seem to follow behind what's happening in the European Union. There seem to be two significant things in our favour. The first is that our testing regime is really good, and that's something that we have implemented and developed over a significant period of time, sunk a lot of resource into. Some people criticise that, I don't. But, our testing in schools has been very good, and so far rates of infection are very low. And the second thing that we should take comfort from is that our vaccination rate is so much better than elsewhere. And if you get enough of your population up to being vaccinated in the end, it's a great sign, and it's much more likely you can unlock. But in the end, of course, if we want to liberalise and have travel again and be able to have normal life back the way that we used to, then we desperately need our European friends to get their house in order as well. And the frustrating thing for those people who are overseeing these programmes is that on the one hand, it's been very centralised by European authorities in procurement terms, but also in kind of authority and agency terms. But the EMA, on the other hand, has been consistent, saying AstraZeneca, Oxford jab is fine. And then the nation states, which cleaved more or less to the behaviour of the European Union in procurement terms, then go their own way and completely ignore the advice on the jab. So, I mean, people in Europe must be holding their head in their hands and wishing that they had a programme like ours at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's the theme that the Daily Telegraph reports on the front page. Europe's stance on Oxford jab irresponsible, says vaccine czar. They've got an interview with Kate Bingham. And Polly, it has put things back a lot, hasn't it, this concern in Europe over the Oxford AstraZeneca jab, because we know many countries, like France, for example, they're already vaccine hesitant, and this is just going to make things even worse.
Yeah, in a way, the worse your vaccine hesitancy problem is, to start with, the more cautious you need to both be and be seen to be to build confidence that you're not just being cavalier about a new medicine. On the other hand, when you act like this, when you pull a vaccination program, you pause it, you go forward, unfortunately, what it does for some people is reinforce that vaccine hesitancy. On the one hand, it's, of course, really important that nation states have the freedom to make their own choices, to follow the needs of their population and to make their own judgments. And that is an important part of building up people's confidence. Nevertheless, it seems to me that this precautionary principle, the idea that you don't do something new unless you're certain that it can be safe, instead of weighing in the balance the harm of doing nothing against the possible risks of doing something, is, in the end, as Kate Bingham says, just a mistake. And I am certainly glad that our regulatory agency does have a more risk welcoming approach, actually, to say that you balance the risks of the new thing against the risks of doing nothing. And that is one of the reasons why we are ahead on this. And I do hope that we will now see a shift in their perspective, because it's really clear that, that just the numbers, I'm not a statistician, but, you can see so many examples of really clever people running the numbers through the model, whatever these possible risks, and they seem so microscopic. But if you weigh them against the number of lives you will save by getting those vaccinations into people's arms, frankly, it's just not really a question.
Yeah, Alex, the Daily Star isn't holding back. Wanted, they've got a wanted poster on their front page. For 4 years, we thought Donald Trump was deranged, but these Euro Herberts are running him a very close second over the Oxford vaccine. I mean, there is a danger, isn't there, that front pages like this aren't hugely helpful. We're already seeing vaccine nationalism. We're also seeing a bit of jingoism as well. I mean, the thing is, this is a global effort, isn't it?
Well, I dare say most of us aren't taking our steer from the Star and the political stance that we'll take, mildly amusing front page. But I, of course, wasn't saying that nation states shouldn't have the ability to control their fates. In fact, I think rather more they should. I think they just got it wrong, is the point, on the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. I mean, Macron is a case in point, of course. His position has gone from saying that they wouldn't have the AstraZeneca vaccine, that its efficacy was unproven, to saying we're not going to use it, but you can't have it, to the UK, the Macron and the Manger syndrome, through to, OK, then we will use it, to we're not going to use it again, but we still won't export it, to we are going to use it, but now only for the elderly that we said it wouldn't work with before. I mean, a total mishmash. But of course, he's got von der Leyen there making him look good. So there is a certain amount of sympathy we can have with our European friends. But I thought that Patrick O'Flynn put it very well in one of the newspapers, Telegraph, I think, today, about the extent to which we can't be No one takes pleasure in another country doing badly, because until this gets fixed, trade isn't going to get back to where it ought to be. We're not going to be able to have holidays that we might wish to have. Jobs aren't going to be on the rebound in the way that we want. So to the point that you were both making before, yes, until everyone's okay, we're going to struggle a bit. But let's be clear, we are ahead of the game now in the United Kingdom, and we should be proud of that. After all, if the UK was behind EU nations, I have no doubt that our media would be bashing the hell out of our government.
Well,
let's give credit where credit's due.
Just staying with you, Alex, very briefly. I mean, do you think our government can be criticised for behaving differently towards the EU as it is towards India, for example? It's very careful not to criticise India, although it's been accused of holding back doses, whilst accusing the EU of talking about potentially doing the same thing. And being very bombastic.
My understanding on that is the contractual position is different. My understanding on that is that in the Indian example, the contract obliges the provider to give vaccines at some point, but doesn't give the UK first preference. In fact, that facility does have explicit first preference for India. And when you bear in mind the size of the Indian population, what one can imagine that's going to be some time. Whereas the vaccines that we're talking about from EU-based factories, not EU vaccines, but factories in the EU producing the vaccines, the contracts there does give the UK first preference because we got in early and we procured faster than other people. So it's qualitatively different, so the comparison's a bit misleading.
OK, all right. Well, let's finish this part, Polly, with the front of the Yorkshire Post. Another depressing headline, I'm afraid. Mental health crisis soaring in the pandemic. This is a warning for employers, really highlighting just how difficult the last year's been.
Yeah, and for different groups of people, very different. But for some people, it's been incredibly stressful because they've been lonely. For some people, it's been incredibly stressful because they've been unable to get away from caring responsibilities, family, whatever that might be. Some people have lost their jobs. Some people have lost their livelihoods. Some people have had the enormous pressure of frontline jobs putting themselves at risk. So across the board, there is this huge mental health impact. One of the things that I think employers can do is think about people's financial health. Actually, the more financial problems, which so many of us are going to have as a result of this crisis, are both a cause and a consequence of mental health problems. And because employers are, the controller of people's pay packets, they can do a huge amount about supporting people to help manage their money, maybe access credit through their employer, through their payroll, to help people kind of recover from what for so many people will be a huge kind of debt and mental health hangover.
Yeah, quick thought on this from you, Alex?
Well, some great front pages today, right? Telegraph hat tip for the Kate Bingham exclusive interview. Yorkshire Post, great front page about the importance of mental health in this crisis. Just one of the reasons we've got to come out of lockdown. My final thought on that would be the Health and Social Care Select Committee in our House of Commons is having an investigation into the impact on children of mental health from coronavirus and lockdown. And I think that's the flip side of what the Yorkshire Post is covering so well today. It's not just affecting one group in society. Lockdown has a terrible effect on many, many groups in our society. And that's one of the reasons we've just got to get out of it as soon as we can.
Yeah, many kids actually struggling with return to school, interestingly. Alex and Polly, thank you both very much. Speak again in a couple of minutes. Coming up, it's a photograph on all the papers' front pages. The Prime Minister getting his vaccine. Bo jab is the Sun's headline. Discussing that in a couple of minutes. Welcome back. Polly and Alex still with me. Alex, let's turn to the front page of the Sun. It's a photo on all the front pages. Boris Johnson getting his jab. He must be very aware, mustn't he, that he is now part of the last group of people to get their first jab, certainly for the next few weeks.
Yeah, it's a really important image. And I think that seeing that people have trust in this is something that resonates around the world. This is the reason we see people taking these photographs. It's why, to return to the thing we were discussing in the first half, President Macron said he would take the AstraZeneca vaccine if he was offered it. That was a really kind of important message to the people of France. It's why we've seen politicians rolling up their sleeves, literally, to have the jab. And I thought James Cleverly today was the latest example of someone of black minority ethnic background making a point of encouraging others to get vaccinated and not to harbour concerns about getting vaccinated. Because these things matter, symbols matter. Our Prime Minister having the vaccine, that is important as a statement in the country. I'm really glad that it's happened.
Yeah, and Polly, the Prime Minister, the French Prime Minister, also getting a jab. In fact, quite a few leaders have been photographed getting their jabs in the last 24 hours or so.
Yeah, and as Alex says, that's incredibly important for sending the message of confidence that other people should be absolutely accepting those appointments if they are offered them as soon as they're offered them. I must alert though viewers, there is one Lord Bethel, who is a health minister, Jim Bethel, who decided to take his entire shirt off for his vaccination. So definitely avoid that photograph if you can.
Yes, Boris Johnson did manage to avoid that when he had his jab a little bit earlier on. And let's finish, Alex, with this story. I mean, what is going on here? A whiskey-flavoured Kit Kat?
Japanese market has always proven to be of interest for products which we might think of as esoteric in British tastes. A whiskey-flavoured Kit Kat actually is not one of them. I think I'd really like this. I think this is a product that is being limited by just being given to the Japanese market. I'm very glad that they have featured it. In fact, the Japanese have hundreds of varieties of Kit Kats, I happen to remember. So in the end, they were always going to get to the whiskey one. I say, let's bring it home. It's time for the whiskey Kit Kat to be released in the UK.
Polly, you were holding your nose. I mean, does this not suit you?
Well, I'm so glad that finally we found something that Alex and I can profoundly disagree on. Just no. There's just no. Before Christmas, they released a gin and tonic flavoured After Eight, which honestly was the worst substance known to man. You have the gin in one hand, the After Eight in the other. Have the whiskey in one hand, the Kit Kat in the other. They do not need to mix.
I think I'm with you. Have a break, have a Kit Kat. We're going to have a break now. Thank you both very much indeed. We'll see you in half an hour or so.